powerful-looking team, and off we go.
Rangers had just reached their second European final, only to lose it again. All the while Jock Stein was building an empire at Parkhead that had just won him the quadruple. This is the story of Ibrox being in the shadows of the late 60s before the great Rangers revival in the latter half of the 70s. Not only had Celtic stolen the ultimate march on Rangers by hiring Jock Stein, they'd won the quadruple, become the first British team to win the European Cup, but Rangers had to endure their worst result ever, a loss against Berwick Rangers in the Cup, the ramifications of which would be felt for quite some time. Personnel-wise, John Greig and Sandy Jardine had become integral cogs in the Rangers machine. Slowly but surely the 64 treble team were being morphed into one that, hopefully, could compete by the time the 70s swung around. Not even the younger members of the squad were immune, as 22-year-old Jim Forrest, who had been responsible for well over 100 goals, he was scapegoated for the defeat and moved on to Preston ahead of the 67-68 season. It was a campaign that started with a loss, a draw and a win over Celtic, as Rangers' greatest rivals eliminated them from the League Cup group phase, while Simon got one over on Jock Stein in the Ibrox League game. Entering November, Rangers had dropped just 2 points in home draws against Hearts and Dunfermline. They led Hibs by a point, Celtic by 2, and were atop the Scottish game. Not good enough apparently, as Scott Simon was jettisoned in favour of David White, who had 1 year of managerial experience, taking Clyde to third place in the league the prior year, and had been poached as Simon's assistant that summer. Whilst Hearts had White's number after a quarter-final replay in the Scottish Cup, Rangers had made the latter stages of European competition, having dispatched Dynamo Dresden and FC Köln in the Fairs Cup. What awaited on the other side of Crimbo was Leeds United. The holders had held Rangers to a goalless draw at Ibrox and quickly dispatched of them in the reverse fixture in Yorkshire, and yet the season wasn't all over just yet. You see, either side of this Leeds elimination, Rangers had picked up successive home league wins against Dundee United and Raith Rovers, the combination of Alex's Ferguson and Willoughby enough for the goals. Even though it left Rangers with the title initiative, the Light Blues were ruined their harsh suspension placed on new signing Colin Stein. Sent off in a 6-0 win against Clyde, not for the first time that season, Stein was subjected to a season-ending 6-week ban. Rangers were only a point and a place back on the so-called Lisbon Lions with a game in hand. That came next, away at 6th place Martyn. A needlessly insane 3-3 draw tied Rangers level on points with their rivals, but they were still behind them on goal average. Now Rangers had to rely on favours. They didn't get one from Martyn, who went to Parkhead and lost, as Rangers kept up the pretence with a steely win at Rugby Park. Given that Celtic would end their season the Tuesday after Rangers, they would either be given the benefit of hindsight to know the result required, or have the pressure heaped on, depending on your outlook. Either way, it counted for shit all when Rangers led Aberdeen 2-1 and somehow chucked in a defeat, leaving a miracle from Jesus himself to keep Celtic from winning the league. You'll be surprised to learn that Dunfermline didn't in fact beat Celtic by more than 30 goals to hand the title to Rangers. The subsequent 68-69 campaign started in identical fashion to the last one. Celtic dumped Rangers out of the League Cup groups before Rangers won the 2 points in the Old Firm curtain raiser. Outside of that, though, at least in the league, is where the similarities stopped. Rangers were able to double Celtic, and after twatting Clyde 6-0 on March 15th, they remained in the title hunt, only 2 behind Celtic with 8 to play. After securing a Scottish Cup final with a win against Aberdeen on March 22nd, Rangers proceeded to win just 3 games in all competitions from their remaining 12, as both Dundee clubs and Airdronians had their number, allowing Celtic to coast to the league. Whilst a loss in Bilbao to Athletic Club kept Rangers in the Fairs Cup, they would be eliminated back in similar fashion to another English side, a 0-0 up at Ibrox before failing to score in defeat, back in England this time to Newcastle. The most gut-wrenching defeat though was saved for Hampden.
Better half of Celtic. Normally comes up to get his head near it, and he's done it! He's done just that! Done just that!
The scapegoat this time, Alex Ferguson, who, after not picking up his man from a corner, allowed Celtic to score. It would be the last time he wore the blue of Rangers. The summer of '69 was desperate times, so called for desperate measures, those being Jim Baxter's sensational return. However, it quickly became apparent that he was no longer the same player. He'd last just one season before retiring, aged only 31. At the third time of asking in the League Cup groups, David White had gotten one over Celtic, sharing the points with the trading of wins. The problem, though, was a 3-3 draw at home to Raith Rovers, which blocked Rangers' passage to the next phase. A combination of 3 defeats from their first 8 in the league and not making it beyond Christmas in the Cup Winners' Cup meant that David White's tenure as Rangers manager was over. As the club's 4th permanent manager, he remains the only man to have completed more than a full season and not won the club a trophy. His successor went by the name of Willie Waddell. If anything, league form got worse when it was apparent that Celtic weren't there to be caught, and in the one level playing field he received against the Parkhead club, they were dispatched at the quarter-final stage of the Scottish Cup. The gap was 12 points to Celtic, who showed no signs of slowing as they appeared in a second European final. It is the mark of how bad Rangers had become that their season highlight was Feyenoord's shock win in the final. Another boost was that the old firm was finally kept apart in the League Cup groups. Dropping just 1 point and easing beyond Hibs and Cowden Beef only put off the prospect of an old firm tie in the competition. Hampden awaited another chance for Rangers to end 4.5 barren years. Leading the line, a 16-year-old by the name of Derek Johnston. Whilst Captain John Greig was missing with illness, the omens did not look great.
Stein and Derek Johnston out in front.
The 1970 League Cup final, a lonely island in a slew of Celtic dominance and Rangers silver in the past 5 years. It wouldn't be the last Derek Johnston goal at Hampden against Celtic that campaign, but sadly the Scottish Cup final would be lost after a replay 4 days later. And whilst 4th place was where Rangers ended up, the entire season ultimately paled into insignificance when 66 people lost their lives on Stairway 13 after a crush late on in the New Year's derby at Ibrox. Out of disaster, Willie Waddell made himself a hero, attending funerals, visiting the injured in hospital and setting it in motion that Ibrox would be renovated so something like this could never happen again. Domestically, the 1971-72 season appeared doomed right from the off. They lost 4 of their first 5 league matches, all but slamming the door on an already unlikely title bid as early as September. Rangers, though, would finish a position higher and 3 points better off compared to the prior campaign, but now the chasm to Celtic had grown a point to 16. By which point the League Cup had already been surrendered thanks to a pair of defeats against Celtic. The Scottish Cup wouldn't be much kinder after a marathon run ended at the semi-final stage to Hibs, as Rangers had to endure 3 replays in an already bloated season. A season bloated by a good old run in Europe.
Du Stade Rennais. Une faute qui lui est fatale, une reprise fulgurante de l'ailier gauche Johnson.
Mas acabaram por perder à luz dos regulamentos.
Kicked away, stopped on the line, and driven in.
By hook or by crook, Rangers were through to another semi-final in European competition, now aiming for their 3rd Cup Winners' Cup final to be held at the Camp Nou in Barcelona. In scenes much like today's pontificating about how football should be played, Rennes manager Jean Prouff wasn't best pleased with Rangers' direct style in a 1-1 draw in the French first leg, which kicked off the cup run. An Alex McDonald goal back at Ibrox won the tie. They were busy calling it McCatenaccio. Far more controversy was reserved for the last 16 tie with Sporting. After a special enough 3-2 win at Ibrox in the first leg, which ought to have been more, that scoreline was repeated in the first 90 minutes of the return fixture as the home side prompted extra time with a 3-2 lead. When Willie Henderson netted after 100 minutes and Sporting replied, the game went to penalties, this despite the away goals rule still being in effect in extra time. The referee didn't notice, Sporting won the shootout, and it was only the work of journalist John Fairgrieve who brought it to everyone's attention. The following morning, Rangers were confirmed as winners on away goals. The mode of progression beyond Torino in the quarter-final stage, much more traditional, as Willie Johnston grabbed the away goal in Turin and Alex McDonald netted the only goal back at home in the second leg. Deja vu? Not quite. It was the same method used to dispose of Rennes back in round 1. Next was Bayern Munich, and whilst not champions of Europe just yet, they did have a totemic spine featuring Sepp Maier, Franz Beckenbauer, Paul Breitner and Gerd Müller, and plus, Rangers knew all about them after 67.
Oh, mit Würgegriff, was? Und jetzt Breitner. Und Tor! Habe ich gemerkt, dass das Tor leer war. Er hätte ins Tor schlagen können, den Ball. Und dann gibt's Eigentor. Ja, gibt's denn das?
Through to Jordan. Jordan working his midfield triangle, left foot shot, and it's a good one, and it's there! A sensation! Over it comes, punched away one-handed, and a chance for the goal! Referee gives it.
They were no match for Rangers, who once again remained resolute on the road, this time relying on an own goal for their score draw in the away first leg. And this time, after a monumental night at Ibrox in front of 80,000, Sandy Jardine grabbed one, Derek Parlane his only goal of the campaign with the other, to pencil in Rangers for their third ever Cup Winners' Cup final. Next stop, Barcelona, Dynamo Moscow.
Towards Colin Stein. Here's Stein, it's a goal! It's a goal by Stein, what a goal! It's a good ball, it's a goal! It's a goal by Willie Johnston. Stein, and here's Willie Johnston with a chance. And it's a goal. It's a goal by Johnston. The great chance for the Russians. And that's a goal, not the... And it's a goal. And it is. The final whistle's gone. Rangers have won the European Cup Winners' Cup. And onto the field go thousands upon thousands.
And just talk about resolve. In front of a largely Scottish crowd, Rangers walked into a 3-goal lead only to be dragged back by the underdogs. But they would hold out and strike it third time lucky. Some note for Willie Waddell to sign off on. Waddell was moved upstairs to become general manager, which allowed Jock Wallace to take the reins. He would be manager at Ibrox for a melting pot of change, as heroes in Colin Stein and Willie Johnston departed not long into the season. Stein sold off to Coventry for a measly 140k, whilst Johnston was flogged off to West Brom. Rangers started the season well, comprehensively through in the League Cup. However, they had suffered 3 losses from their first 5, which kneecapped them instantly in the league. And with the League Cup all for nothing thanks to a semi-final elimination at the hands of Hibs, there wasn't much to play for until the Scottish Cup swung back around. The 1973 Scottish Cup final was more important than most. For one, it was a centenary year for organised Scottish football and 101 years after Rangers had been formed. Jock Wallace's side had been unbeaten in the last 25 games in a strong end to an otherwise whitewashed season for teams in green. Hibs beat Celtic in the League Cup, and Celtic, by now naturally, won their 8th championship flag on the spin. It had been 7 long years since Kai Johnson's winner in the 66 final, but that was also against a strong championship winning Celtic side.
Johnston. To have time. It's a good ball, it's a goal! And towards Khan going through, and it's there! This is a vital one for Celtic, and he's done it! And it's in there, it's there!
The club made their belated return to the Cup Winners' Cup after being banned from the competition owing to crowd trouble in the 72 final. They returned to a different playing field. Borussia Mönchengladbach the team to defeat them after Ajax had made similarly easy work of the Light Blues in the Super Cup the prior season. Against a team as dominant as Stein's Celtic, losing 3 of your first 6 in the league spelled disaster, and it meant another regression in the Championship to 3rd behind Hibs. This time there would be no safety net, as Celtic eliminated them from the League Cup and Dundee disposed of them in the Scottish Cup. With title 10 on the horizon at Parkhead, something had to change, and quick. When Bill Struth became manager of Rangers, Celtic led the way in terms of Scottish Championships, 15 titles to 10. When the next seismic manager took charge in an old firm capacity, Jock Stein, Rangers had overtaken their rivals, earning 34 to Celtic's 20. Heading into the 1974-75 campaign, that deficit had been significantly reduced thanks to Stein's 9 titles won in a row. To stop Celtic's 30th crown and a landmark 10 in a row, Rangers had to stop their longest ever championship drought immediately. They were doubled by Hibs in the League Cup group phase, signalling the end of Rangers' first dream of silverware. But in the league they started like a house on fire, winning 11 and drawing 2 of the first 13, which included a first win at Parkhead since 1968. This was the trophy that really mattered. Despite losses at Hibs and Airdronians, another old firm win kept Rangers clear of their rivals as February commenced. They led by a point, 12 matches remained. Rangers continued to scrape results, 2-0 at home to Dunfermline and 2-1 at Clyde and at home to Hearts, whilst a Derek Parlane hat-trick at home to Killie didn't confirm both points in a 3-3 draw. Meanwhile at Parkhead, their quest for 10 had caved in, 2 points from 3 games, which was followed by an even more disastrous March, losses at Aberdeen and Airdrie, with a defeat at home to Dundee United wedged in between. As Jock Wallace's side kept scraping wins at home to St Johnstone and Motherwell, as well as at Dens Park, Rangers were on the precipice of the title. Celtic weren't even second anymore when the Light Blues travelled to Easter Road, the team in second place. A point would be enough for the title.
Sprinting downfield, and it's a nice cross. There's a great chance for him, and the ball's in the net, and it's a goal. There's Jim MacArthur. Here's Jordan. Keane going on the outside, going in the front. Chance for Stein, and a goal. Jackson heading down. And
11 years of hurt was over, as was 9 years of Celtic tyranny. There remained John Gray, Colin Jackson and Willie Matheson in blue, the only ones who had tasted championship glory up until now. The club was on a high, taking on a world tour of places like Canada, New Zealand and Australia, and the good vibe bled well into the subsequent campaign with the League Cup won over Celtic in October. A 4-match winless run in the league which had transformed overnight to the Premier League, combined with a European Cup exit to San Etienne, was the first true test of the season. However, the 1-0 loss at Pittodrie on December the 6th was Rangers' last defeat of the season in all competitions. When Celtic stumbled in mid-April, Rangers simply kept going, wrapping up another championship at Tannadice 2 days before the final Old Firm derby of the season. Celtic wouldn't even be able to stop Rangers going for the domestic treble since they'd already exited the cup. Instead, Jock Wallace's men met Hearts at Hampden.
Johnson moving in, and it's a goal! He's putting it in. McDonald. And it's in! Nice play by McKean. There's the cross, there's the goal.
The third treble was complete once again, surpassing Celtic. It would be the last time for a bit that Rangers would have something to shout about, considering the absolute shit show that was the 76-77 campaign. A League Cup season that ran 11 matches does sound like fun, but it required 6 league games and 4 attempts to defeat Clyde Bank in the quarter-finals. So by the time Aberdeen stuck 5 beyond them in the semis, plenty just didn't care anymore. After all, FC Zurich had eliminated them from the first round of the European Cup, and a failure to beat Celtic in the first 3 of 4 Old Firm league meetings had put the league to bed by January. The good old Scottish Cup though soon came back around again, and a mix of home ties and comfortable opponents eased Rangers into Hampden. The final, opponents being who they were, it was never going to be easy.
What a nerve-wracking moment for Kennedy.
And there we had it, a blue treble exchange for a green double in Glasgow. With the rise of both Aberdeen and Dundee United, it made the 77-78 campaign completely unpredictable. Wallace made a bit of a splash in the market, Bobby Russell, Gordon Smith and Davy Cooper all coming in. That combined with the abolition of the League Cup group phase, it was an easing in process to the season. Thank fuck, because both Aberdeen and Hibs beat Rangers in the first 2 league games of the campaign. Thankfully, a 3-2 win in the first Ibrox derby of the season counteracted those upsets, as did progress through to the quarterfinals of the League Cup, where Rangers beat Dunfermline comfortably. The only brick to fall, typically, was yet another early exit from European matters. Young boys beaten in the qualifiers, but FC Twente stopped Rangers from scoring in 2 games to eliminate them in the first round. Before the Light Blues turned up to Pittodrie and received a Christmas Eve pumping on the East Coast, Rangers led the table by a commanding 5 points. In spite of a January 78 win over Celtic, the true test of Rangers' title credentials was in Aberdeen come the spring. When the Dons dished out another win over Rangers, a 2-horse title race became that bit closer, now just 4 points. By the time the club re-emerged in the league to defeat Partick Thistle, yet another trophy had been added to the cabinet. Gordon Smith with the winner in the League Cup final against Celtic. 1 down, 2 to go. Inroads were being made into the other cup too, defeating Berwick Rangers of all teams, Stirling Albion and Kilmarnock to pencil in a Dundee United semi. Since Celtic had already been put out, Rangers were now favourites for a second treble in 3 seasons. It was only ever going to be Celtic to spur on the charge to stop that feat, winning as they did on March 25th at Parkhead. Hibs, St Mirren and Ayr United all followed suit in taking points off Jock Wallace's side to stretch a record which now read 2 wins from 7. The best friends of the Ibrox club in April 1978, Dundee United, who rolled over not just once or twice but 3 times, failing to score in all 3 games as Rangers booked another Hampden final and put them on the verge of another league title. 1 match remained, Motherwell at home, whilst Aberdeen travelled to 5th place Hibs. A simple bettering of their rivals' result would do. Colin Jackson and Gordon Smith with the strikes in a 2-0 win that confirmed leg 2 of 3 of a substantial treble. Next up, Aberdeen and the chance at another streak of immortality. Enjoying the Scottish football videos we've been putting out lately? Well, get on this playlist. Beyond Celtic and Rangers, we've got football from Dundee, Aberdeen, Edinburgh and Motherwell.